which supplements the video recording of that meeting available on the Commission's website. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the November 8th, 2021 meeting?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Yes, motion made by Commissioner Peters, seconded by Vice Chair Wong.
Okay, absent objection to this motion, do we have unanimous
Yes,
consent?
Mr. Chair, I just have one typo comment. It's just a typo. It says Commission Legal. It's a
Okay.
page 2.
Are
This
you
is
guys hearing me
commission.
okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
You broke up a little bit for me, Commissioner Legal, but I heard what you had to say. So we
Yeah.
can certainly take care of that typo.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just clarify, I have my pen here. Commissioner Legal, is it regarding the at 2:10 p.m.?
Yes.
And what is the correction?
It says commission instead of commission. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you, Commissioner.
No problem. Yeah, just a typo. Yeah.
Okay, absent any objections or other corrections, do we have unanimous consent to approve said minutes with the change?
Yes.
No objections.
With unanimous consent, so ordered. We will now proceed to the remote testifiers. To those coming in remotely, please video conference from a quiet location and mute your television. Also, be sure that your microphones and cameras are in working order. For those joining us by phone, we will identify you by your phone prefix. If technical issues arise, I will give you a few moments to try to resolve minor connection issues. However, if it cannot be resolved, I will have to move on to the next testifier. When I call your name, please state your full name and the agenda item or items you are testifying on. Speakers are limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. When the timer goes off, please conclude your remarks promptly. I will close testimony once all remote speakers have testified. So looking on our testifier list, I see Ms. Ellen Gibson, or Ms. Ellen Carson, sorry.
And Chair, if I may, before Ms. Carson begins, I just wanted to note for the record, the Commission did receive 3 pieces of written testimony, one from Faith Action Housing Now, and I believe Ms. Carson will be testifying as to that. Ms. Iwasa, Natalie Iwasa, did provide written testimony, as well as Mr. John Kawamoto. Those are the 3 pieces of written testimony that have been provided to the commissioners. And present, we have Ms. Carson as well as Ms. Iwasa, and we'll proceed from there to confirm any other testifiers.
Great,
Thank you. This is Ellen Carson on behalf of Faith Action Housing Now. Thank you so much for what the Commission is doing, and particularly for the study on the rates and classifications in regards to looking for new policies for taxes here in Honolulu that could make a major difference in regards to our affordable housing. We are here to support strongly the empty homes tax that is on your agenda as item 5.1a, and appreciate very much the support to endorsing that and sending it on to the council for approval. So I'll stand on our testimony and am available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Carson. Are there any questions for the testifier?
Vice Chair Wong and Chambers. Question for Ms. Carson. In your testimony, and I noticed in other testimony too, this number has been thrown out, but there's been a lot of reference to tens of thousands of vacant housing units. Where is this information from?
Yes, the U.S. Census Bureau for 2020 shows, in terms of statistics for the state that there are 85,000 vacant units, or at least that's their designation in regards to properties in Hawaii. And we believe that of the units that are vacant in Hawaii, that a large number of those are here on this island. So when we say tens of thousands of units, it's a portion of those that the U.S. Census Bureau has identified. And I'm glad to, I think I have previously shared that link with the commission, but I'm glad to do so again. There is an alternate method of evaluating vacant homes, and I believe that number is less that the U.S. Census Bureau uses. It uses two different ones, which does get confusing, but I'm glad to try to provide any information that's helpful to you, so you'll have the U.S. Census Bureau citations for that.
Certainly. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners for the testifier? Seeing and hearing none, thank you very much for your testimony, both written and oral, Ms. Carson. We will move on to the next testifier, Natalie Iwasa.
Hi, can you hear me, commissioners?
Sure.
Yes,
yeah,
we can.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting testimony on these very important issues. I did submit written testimony, but it was kind of late. I'm not sure you had a chance to really review it. But on the vacant homes tax or the empty homes tax, I just have some questions. I'm not sure that that the cost of implementing this is really worth it. And I ask you to take a good look at that. I'm also concerned about what might happen since this is planned to be a retroactive tax. What would happen if a home is sold prior to the end of the fiscal year and the seller is gone, and then the new homeowner gets this bill for this empty homes tax? I don't think that would be fair. So I ask you to take a look at that. Under number 2 in item E, though, there is a provision in there that I absolutely oppose, and that is the requirement that a landlord would have to submit a lease agreement and proof of excise taxes paid in order to get an exemption. And first of all, I think it's really important for you to understand that when homes are rented for long term, at least in my experience, and I'm aware of others, they're usually like a 1-year lease, but then they turn over to a month-to-month. And so if you're trying to determine a 6-month occupancy period and a month-to-month lease, and you're looking at something that was signed 2 years ago, I don't know that, how or the city would be able to determine the occupancy on that particular property. And with respect to the GE taxes, a landowner could own several properties, and how would the city be able to determine occupancy based on that? So the other part that I actually oppose on this is the city has no business knowing what I or other tenants pay for rent. And I just think that that is just going too far in trying to implement this potential new policy. So I ask you to consider that when you're talking about this. With respect to the Valuation Subcommittee report, I'm really, really disappointed that once again, the committee did not get the responses from the Real Property Tax Assessment Division. You pointed out in the report, I think it was well written, that other municipalities freely provide information to taxpayers, and Honolulu is still not doing that. So I don't know how much stronger that message can be made to City Council, but something needs to be done, because taxpayers should understand how taxes are being assessed or how their valuations are being done. And that's currently not the case. So however you need to emphasize that, I ask that you do so. So thank you so much for allowing me to testify, and I look forward to your draft report soon.
Thank you very much, Ms. Iwasa. Commissioners, I hope if you're able to take some questions, we'd appreciate it. Commissioners, are there any questions for the testifier?
Yeah, Chair Moll, this is Jack Legal. Thank you, Ms. Iwasa, for your testimony. We really wrestled when we come up with this, the enforcement side of this empty home tax. We wrestled on how we're going to enforce this so that it becomes worth it. Because that's always I think the failure of any law or any policy, whatever it is the enforcement. I was just wondering if you have any, in your experience, if you have any recommendation or suggestion on how we can enforce this law or this empty home tax.
As I understand it, a lot of what we have in our tax code is based on the property owner or somebody else saying that this is what we do. We occupy our home, or yes, we have a disability due to whatever, and therefore we get the exemption. So basically it's I forget what you call that. Like, I don't know if affidavit is the correct term. But honestly, I'm not sure that this is even the proper route to take. It just seems like we are always trying to get new fees or new taxes or higher fees, higher taxes. And I think you've heard me say before that I think that there are some exemptions that really we shouldn't have. And, if you're looking at trying to increase revenue, that would be, in my opinion, the best place to get it. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm really not sure on the enforcement, because I think, if you're asking every homeowner or every property owner to submit something, that in itself is already a lot of paperwork for the city to take a look at. And then, if there's some other document that increases the amount of effort that the city has to do to try to enforce things. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, thank you anyway for your ideas. On your first comment, the first opposition that you have on the beginning of the fiscal, when they sell the property and then it will be passed on to whoever is going to own it later on. Would you be willing to accept the fact that since they're going to be doing a declaration whether they occupy that in the past 6 months, 180 days, would it be possible that if they say, yes, we have not occupied it, it's vacant for 180 days, and then they sell it, that the city will have the opportunity or the power or authority to put a lien on that property so that it will be paid in escrow? It will not be passed on to the new buyer.
Well, if you're talking about a sale that occurs prior to the end of the fiscal year, escrow is going to be closed by the time the property owner gets the notice, because it sounds like it would come at the same time as the regular bill. There's no opportunity to collect that money from the prior owner or the owner that didn't occupy for the property for 180 days. I think the only way that you could make that fair is to say that in that type of instance, the city would waive the fees or the tax, because it certainly wouldn't be fair to tax the new homeowner or new property owner.
So the question there is really about timing, yeah?
Yes,
This,
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Iwasa. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Pham, do you have a question for the testifier?
I just have a follow-up to the question from Commissioner Legal. I believe that this is covered by the exemption that's written into the report, which is about sale. So you would just have to show proof of sale or listing, which is something that we discussed. So I just wanted to make sure that was put out there.
Okay, so that's a good point. But well, let's say that the prior property wasn't vacant for that reason. Let's say it was vacant from July 1st to December 31st for whatever reason. And then the owner put the property on the market. And in today's market, things are turning over in what, 30 days, 60 days at tops. So let's say they turn it over in 60 days and the new buyer comes in, then it really wasn't vacant due to the sale because that was only 60 days. So I'm not sure that that particular exemption would cover it. And even if it, I don't think that would work, because how would the new owner even know why a property was vacant or if it was vacant? You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you for your testimony.
Okay.
We'll look at rewording that so that it can cover this more explicitly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So any other questions for the testifier? If not, I have one. Commissioner Bean, please.
Okay, so I have a question, Ms. Yuasa, regarding the Valuation Subcommittee. So we did receive a few responses today from RPAD, and one of them has to do with the Marshall and Swift manual. We asked to be provided a copy, as have past commissions, as well as a summary of how that model is implemented in the real property assessment division's appraisals. The answer had to do with, let's see, it says that under the user license agreement, the administration is prohibited from satisfying this inquiry. Is that something that you have also heard before?
That sounds very familiar. I think that that's about the same thing that we were told in 2019.
And can you tell me if you were able to check back with the licensor to see if that was true?
You know, we asked for information for months, and we finally got a response like late in the game, like as you are right now. Back, you know, you're in the end of November and you got to provide a report soon. So I believe, as far as I know, nobody checked with the vendor to confirm that.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Ms. Owasa, for staying on for our questions as well. I appreciate it. I hope it's not hasn't been too much. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I have one for Ms. Owasa. Ms. Owasa, you mentioned you're not sure. You stated that you're not sure that the benefits outweigh the costs of the empty homes tax proposal. I mean, if it was demonstrated that the benefits did outweigh the costs, would you sort of change? Would you be open to reassessing that point on the empty homes tax?
Well, certainly, and in fact, when this idea first came out several years ago, I thought it was a good idea. But then I was thinking about certain things that might happen, and now as you've put forth the full idea here, I do have questions about it. But yeah, anytime that there's an idea out there that looks like we can do something that is beneficial and not onerous upon the taxpayers or the administration. I think it's worth reevaluating.
Okay. Thank you for your open mind. And by the way, thank you for your testimony and your prior experience with the commission here is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much for appearing.
Sure, you're welcome.
And so with that, I see some other folks on the screen here. Commission Aide,
Sure.
you want to take us through potentially who,
Yes.
if there are other
I
testifiers?
have confirmed, thank you, Chair. I have confirmed with a couple of individuals, and I recognize a couple names, but if I could confirm with Mr. Keith Yamashita. Mr. Yamashita, do you wish to testify or are you just monitoring? And it appears he's signed off. There is a individual who signed on with numbers indicating 248619721008. Does that individual wish to testify or are they just monitoring?
That's Ms. Carson. That's our prior testifier. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah.
I've already confirmed regarding, so that all commissioners are aware, Brandon is a staff member with council member or council budget chair Say, as well as Ms. Denny. Deputy Ogsalute, I presume that you are just monitoring this meeting? Yes, and Mr. Ogsalute is with the Office of the Corporation Counsel. And Mr. Takara is present as well virtually, and I believe will be available to talk with the commission when they are ready. So, Chair, there appear not to be any other testifiers remotely or in person.
Thank you very much, Commission Aide White. There being no other testifiers, testimony is now closed. So now we're moving on to our subcommittee reports and recommendations. Turning now to the formal reports and recommendations of certain subcommittees. Members, this will be the formal presentation of these reports by the subcommittees. After both reports have been presented, we will open the floor to a robust discussion related to both reports. No formal action will be taken today on these reports, just discussion. Commissioner Pham, would you like to present or outline the report of the Classifications and Rates Subcommittee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the Classifications and Rates Subcommittee presented this written report that cites the previous work, such as the UCLA study under the previous mayor administration, as well as the resiliency plan for the county, as a basis for this work being considered by the commission. And in the report, we compare a bill that is currently on the table, Bill 76, to a new proposal, which is entitled the Empty Homes Tax Proposal. There are some key differences between the approaches, but ultimately the goal is to assess a tax on empty or vacant homes and to use the revenue raised to put toward housing or homelessness, or if such a disincentive were to be implemented, to motivate property owners who are holding real property in our county as an investment to sell it or to lease it long term. Much of this is motivated by our local housing crisis and the lack of affordable housing options. So that is the comparison here between a current bill and a new idea. The main difference is that the empty homes tax proposal is to assess retroactively. So instead of working like the existing property taxes, this would be assessed as a supplement on top of any property tax that you currently pay. But most property owners, we might anticipate to be exempt. So if you are an owner occupant, if you are leasing to a long-term renter, or many other circumstances which are listed in the report, there are ways to opt out of having to pay this tax. So it is aimed at trying to despeculate our housing market so that locals have a fighting chance. That is the plan in a nutshell. and the rest you can read for yourself. There is a bill drafted just for your ability to look at what such a bill might look like if it were to go to the City Council. And there is also an appendix, Appendix B, which is the declaration form that Vancouver uses. So one of the enforcement mechanisms that we discussed as a subcommittee was a declaration about past use. And we're just holding up this Vancouver declaration form as an example, but not necessarily something that would have to be replicated 100%. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Pham. Let's move on to, we'll do questions after both the, and discussion after both of the reports have been read. So Vice Chair Wong, would you like to present or outline the report of the Valuations Subcommittee?
Certainly. Vice Chair Wong here. The Valuation Subcommittee stands on its report issued November 23rd, 2021. The first and the primary highlight of these is the lack of progress or change from the 2019 OR PTCA report. There was a concern raised in the prior commission's report about the lack of transparency and the lack of clarity in both the valuation and appellate processes. Both of these were raised and they don't seem to have been addressed, primarily at the front of the appeals process when taxpayers are beginning to review their records and beginning to review the appellate procedures. It's not available for them. It's not clear how exactly their properties are going to be valued. And second, once they do file an appeal, they're limited with the materials that they have when they do conduct an appeal. When the subcommittee received the response from RPAD, including cards with the building and improvement valuation, as well as the MK127 or the land valuation for a sample or hypothetical property. These were the standard forms and the standard types of materials that were given to taxpayers if they were to request them. However, upon review of these materials, it's plain that the common taxpayer, and especially with those who cannot afford the means to employ an attorney or an appraiser to help them with an appeal, will not be able to understand these types of materials. When it comes to taxpayers understanding how their properties are valued and understanding how to appeal these valuations going forward, little has been done in the way of making it possible for taxpayers to do this. While we do appreciate the responses that were provided with these hypotheticals and the RPAD's official stance on both the Marshall and Swift valuation system and the stance it takes on the application of the income method to the valuation of properties, it's the Vice Chair's opinion, and I believe it's that of the Valuation Subcommittee, that taxpayers deserve to know how Marshall and Swift is applied to their properties. They deserve to understand the methodology involved, even that if that doesn't employ or involve giving direct data or direct, formulas that are involved, just the way that these numbers come about, or just a brief summary, something that will let a taxpayer try to understand how this is employed. I think that's important for going forward on both the previous committee's reports, recommendations, and the concerns raised with the current Valuation Subcommittee.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wong. Commissioner Bean, would you like to add anything?
I was just wondering if everyone had a chance to look at the RPAD response and take a look at the cards that Commissioner Wong is talking about. And if you haven't had a chance to yet, would it be possible to put them up on display for a quick look, just so that you can see what a taxpayer might see if they were considering appealing?
Sure, I think I have them up. I think I can actually do that.
Oh, beautiful.
I'll do that right now.
Right, Vice Chair Wong here, just clarifying the materials requested. It's going to be Exhibits A and Exhibits B from the November 15, 2021 submission of Administrator Steve or from the Oahu Real Property Tax Advisory Commission Valuation Subcommittee and the responses.
Can folks see my share screen here, which is one of those valuation cards?
Yes.
Very hard, I think,
Yes.
but we do have a copy of that, though.
And
Okay.
Commissioners, I believe that document on shared screen currently is identified as Exhibit A in the electronic version that was provided to you. So what is on the screen currently is Exhibit A, and then if and when Chair shares the other document, which is 2 pages long, that will be Exhibit B.
Okay, now I'll share the next one. Okay. All right, does everyone see this next one on my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
This is the comparable sales analysis from 2011. Okay, I will stop sharing that. Great. So, Commissioner Bean, was there something you wanted to point out with that?
I just wanted to give the other commissioners a chance to see the technicality of those cards. If you, as Commissioner Wong explained earlier, if you are not able to actually secure an attorney for this or an appraiser, it would be very difficult to understand these cards. It looks familiar to me as a realtor to look at the comparisons, the comparables, but even then, some of this I wouldn't understand necessarily. So for people who are considering appealing, this is a very difficult process for so many reasons. I just wanted the commissioners to have a chance to look at it.
Great. Thank you.
Can I ask just a clarification, Commissioner Bean? So what is the difference between Exhibit A and Exhibit B?
Perhaps Commissioner Wong could best answer that one.
Commissioner Wong.
Certainly, Vice Chair Wong. Commissioner Legal, Exhibit A is what is known as a card, and the Real Property Assessment Division uses these cards to show the calculation and appraisal of value for improvements on a real piece of real property. Exhibit B is known as a MK127, or it's a land sales comparable analysis, and that is used to find the value or the appraisal of the land value for a piece of real property.
Okay. Thank you.
And Commissioners, just to clarify,
when,
there was a error on my part in compiling these 2 exhibits. Exhibit A is technically 2 pages. Exhibit B, which Vice Chair indicated, is MK127, which is the comparison. That is 1 page. So I will be renumbering these exhibits, but it's Exhibit A is 2 pages, and has the notation CA320 in the upper right-hand corner with page 1 and page 2 CA320. So those Exhibit A should be 2 pages. Exhibit B should just be 1 page with the indication of MK127. But I'll fix that in the formal communication number that we get for this document.
So again, just a clarification, Commissioner Wong. So when the taxpayer wanted to apply or wants to apply or appeals, are they given these the cards or what happened? What type of materials are they given? Information.
Well, in my own experience, the materials provided can vary, but these 2 were provided in response to the Valuation Subcommittee's request to the Real Property Assessment Division. And in that request, we requested the cards and work papers for the building appraisals, comparable land sales analysis report, and any other information or materials that would typically be provided to a taxpayer attempting to understand their appraisal and assessment. These were the only two materials that we received in response to that request.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you because being in the tax appeal board, it's really confusing for the taxpayer, you know, how their properties are being evaluated. So I don't know how we can make
Thank
it more
you.
clear.
Certainly,
Thanks. I think that,
Vice Chair Wong
thank
here.
you.
I don't want to, call attention to any other incident where a appraiser may have given more or less, but just based on our response, this is what we've received. And in my experience, this is typically what a taxpayer can expect to receive when they go to the Board of Review for an appeal.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Commissioner Vin. Thanks, Commissioner Wong.
Thank you very much. Are there any other
Chair.
questions? Well, I guess we should, yes, Commissioner Aid White.
Just very briefly, Vice Chair Wong, with regards to the valuation report, just for the record, since this is the presentation of the report, I believe you have discussed transparency in the process as well as discussion regarding the appellate process. There was a fourth point in your subcommittee's report regarding, I believe, something related to valuation of leasehold properties. Did you wish to just formally address that
Oh,
briefly?
I'm sorry, that was on the last page. Thank you for reminding me.
That's great.
Sure, for the record, at the previous Valuation Subcommittee report, we discussed in detail the lack of equity in the valuation of properties, particularly in regard to leasehold properties. The Valuation Subcommittee looked specifically at ROH Section 8-6.3 subsection A, which means that the city is required by ordinance to assess all real properties in its entirety. This includes those which are leasehold properties, which will be assessed to the leaseholders of long-term leases. There's a great sense of confusion among taxpayers. We received testimony to this point that leasehold or those holding long-term leaseholds still have to pay taxes on their property as assessed in the entirety, even though they only own a short lease term or a long-term lease term in this regard. We understand this is established by statute, but it has been raised as a source of inequity in the current tax structures, particularly for those who have long-term leaseholds. In terms of also understanding who is responsible for paying a leaseholder's tax, I think the subcommittee agreed that more could be done to explain this. I think there was one FAQ that referred to the current ROH sections, but it was not particularly clear when we first began looking for the answers on who pays a leaseholder's property tax bill. So the recommendations in the report ask for a distinction and delineation between the valuation for a leasehold and a fee simple ownership of property.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wong. Much appreciated. Let's move on to discussion. We can do questions in our next section for each of these items. Turning now to our discussion on these two reports of the subcommittees, let us start with the Classifications and Rates Subcommittee and their empty homes proposal recommendation. Opening up to members for discussion. Comments, thoughts, questions, concerns, etc.
Vice Chair Wong here with a question for the Classification Rate Subcommittee. It appears that we already have a number of incentives, if you may, in the current real property tax structure to encourage home ownership, to encourage occupancy of a home with the current homeowner's exemption. Is there something that you would distinguish in this bill that, would make it more worthwhile than just increasing the entire residential property tax rate and also increasing the homeowner's exemption? Since those are already in place.
Well, May I take a stab at this real quick, Commissioner Pham? I think one of the ideas behind the anti-homes tax is that it's addressing like a specific market failure, and that's a failure for affordable housing to be built. And I'm not sure if across the and how vacant homes and sort of second homes that sit idle and unused that take up resources of the city are sort of contributing more cost to the system than what we're getting in revenues. So I think the idea is that it's really targeting sort of this specific market failure of a lack of affordable housing on the market, and increased prices and a lack of funds to invest in affordable housing. Partially.
I understand that. I guess I wanted a little bit of is that a little bit of an explanation as to why this would be preferable to expanding the current incentives we have in place, like the homeowner's exemption, like the current property tax rates.
And I think also it's not really encouraging home ownership. This bill is not designed to encourage home ownership, right? It's designed to move properties onto the market and to grab a higher marginal revenue take from a less price sensitive resident, possibly someone who is willing to pay to have a second home for their use that sits idle, maybe willing to pay more in taxes. And so we should be getting that revenue when possible from those sources on a marginal basis. I think that's one of the reasons. And I think anecdotally, it's been observed that the recent upsurge in sales and that's causing a spike in prices has been, a lot of it's been in second homes bought by non-residents. And if those are taken out of the rental supply, it's simple economics that supply and demand will cause prices to go up.
And I'd like to add something here. This is Commissioner Pham. Because we are looking at doing this as an interim report, there is that more holistic relook that the policy subcommittee started with addressing this issue through the existing system of rates, classifications, and homeowners exemption. One thing that I don't think that would ever accomplish is taking care of renters. And the overwhelming majority of low-income residents here are renters, and the barriers to home ownership are a lot more than just price in this case. But if this tax were to be implemented, I don't think that would necessarily open up the opportunities for home ownership at low income levels. I think it would really be beneficial to renters and open up more opportunities, rent the existing inventory that's currently not available on the market.
I understand that, but it seems that a lot of the sales in recent years, particularly those towards out-of-state residents and those which would be classified under this ordinance as vacant homes, were luxury homes and luxury second homes. Is it the subcommittee's belief that these luxury homes would be put in the market for these lower income renters? Or would they be priced out?
Well, I think there would be a higher marginal tax rate assessed on those properties that aren't put on the market. So it would both. I mean, a perfect world, there would be, if the primary policy goal of this measure holds true, there would be zero revenue, right? Because we'd get all second homes would be or vacant homes would be put on the market or rented out, not put on the market, sorry, rented out. So, it's kind of in search of, I think there's a middle ground there. I think some buyers are going to have enough, you know, buying power and wealth, frankly, to afford that luxury of having a second home that sits idle, while folks that can't, this is going to incentivize them to put its highest and best use, actually put it towards its highest and best use, which is for a resident to live in it or to be rented out for other uses.
Got it. Thank you both. Appreciate that.
Commissioner Bean.
Question, please, for the rates committee. So in regards to the vacant homes tax, and I haven't read the actual proposed bill yet, but would it allow for things like exemptions for, let's say a property goes into probate, and in the middle of that probate, you really can't do anything with that home, and it could ostensibly be in probate for over 6 months. So is there a means for the family to get an exemption on that tax in its present state?
I believe there is an exemption written in the bill, correct?
I think so, because
Yeah,
that's
for
one of the
state-
questions that I have raised actually about in probate or in foreclosure for that matter. You know, let's say we're vacant, and I think it's in the exemptions. Correct me, Commissioner Pham, if I didn't read it right.
I can point Commissioner Pham if you'd like me to. Under page 3 of Appendix A, which would be section 8-blank.4 exemptions, specific to probate proceedings, I believe it's subsection 3. So it's page 3, Appendix A, subsection 3 of the proposed section 4 exemptions. The residential property is subject to a probate court proceeding, or the title to the property is the subject of pending litigation for at least 6 months of the tax year, or the property is subject to a court order that prohibits occupancy for at least 6 months in the tax year. That is one prescribed exemption provided under the proposed measure.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Mold. I have another question. On the declaration form that we saw from Vancouver, do they have a requirement to attach a proof of payment of excise taxes, or what was the other piece that the testifier, Ms. Owaza,
Lease agreement.
and a lease agreement? Is that provided for in the Vancouver law in any way? Did you see that anywhere? And if one of the commissioners, perhaps I can ask. I see Ms. Carson is on the line still. Maybe I could gear this towards her.
Yes, I believe that in Vancouver, the government has the right to be able to obtain tax returns as part of proof in regards to any investigation and audit. I do not believe that they require a tax return as part of the declaration process. And I believe the same is true for the lease agreement. I'm not confident on that. I'd need to look back to see whether they ask for it to be attached, but it's my understanding that the main thing that's done in Vancouver is simply to answer under oath the questions and to be ready to present that information if the property is made subject of investigation or audit.
Thank you, Ms. Carson. To elaborate on that appendix, the only thing that I read was that you needed to, as Ms. Carson just stated, provide the information under oath, and that information is the name of your tenant. But after that, the lease agreement could be something that proves your claim.
Now, this is Commissioner Mold again, do you envision the declaration form and this occurring at the same time, and what's the right term? Like at the same time as the regular filing of taxes, and because of this retroactivity versus prospectivity sort of difference, What are your thoughts on how, I mean, I know in your testimony, Ms. Carson, that you talk about how it's very important to clearly state, you know, what these things are to avoid confusion. Have the commissioners or anyone else given this any more thought in terms of how this would be sent out? Would it go along with the regular taxes, or would it be something similar to someone claiming a homeowner's exemption, for instance? I mean, to me, it seems that if this were aligned with like someone claiming a homeowner exemption and the same type of, you know, process, that it you know, you could eliminate some of the potential work involved or duplication of work involved in something like this.
I think, Chair Mold, that's probably the essence of Ms. Iwasa's question, you know, that basically the declaration is sent simultaneously, I think, with the tax assessment valuation. And that's why I say it's probably about timing. What happened if it's sold, you know, during the fiscal year? Will that be passed on to the new buyer, you know? So I think it goes into the essence of her question, I think, Ms. Iwasa. I don't know if she's still on the call, you know. I think she's still in the call, yeah. Ms.
Yeah,
Iwasa.
this is Natalie. Did you want me to address that?
Yeah, I thought that was, that's probably what the essence of your question, right? That Ms. Chair Moll is asking.
Right. It goes to the timing. I mean, I do appreciate the fact that you guys are looking at retroactivity, but if it goes out with the assessment notices, which is what, July, then you run into that issue of somebody buying the property and not really knowing what the usage was for the prior year.
Yeah.
Yep. This is all stuff I think we will be contemplating for sure.
Yeah.
This is Commissioner Pham. We discussed this topic as to like when the information will be presented to the taxpayer. And in our report, we just mentioned that what we're looking for in the future, if this were to be recommended to the City Council, that we can have an additional report later that can explain exactly when, if it's best to go along with the existing schedule for billing and notifying taxpayers, or if, because it's supplemental and we want to keep taxpayers thinking about these things separately, then it could be done at another point in time. But we discussed it and we didn't have a recommendation other than to move forward with the retroactivity, and that's all we had to say in our report.
This is Natalie again. So just something to think about. During the month of September, I think the Real Property Tax Assessment Division is really quite busy with exemption applications. And so I don't know if that would be another opportunity for communications to go out to taxpayers separate from the assessment notices. Just something to think about.
Have you guys thought of a way for taxpayers to what was I thinking? Anyway, this is all very good. Let me are there any other commissioners with questions right now? Commissioner Bean. I think you're on mute.
Oh, how do you apply this scenario, 180 days vacant, to a property that's, let's say, vacant for 90 days in one fiscal period and 90 days in another fiscal period.
I'm
So,
gonna let
go ahead.
Commissioner Pham answer that, but I'm gonna take a crack at it. I think our thought was it has to be vacant consecutively for 180 days.
So what if it's
Because
consecutively?
as of now, I think the way that people go around the around this is okay, 180 days, but I'm gonna occupy it for one day.
Right. So this is applied to approximate fiscal years. What if it's 180 days consecutive vacant, but part of the vacancy is in one fiscal year and that other part falls into the next fiscal year?
Yep, as it is currently written, that would ultimately be exempt.
Thank you.
Another question I have is, are you aware of any situations? I mean, there's a lot of disclosure that occurs upon the sale of a property. Couldn't this be included, as one of the things that's disclosed for the sale, and to make sure that that those taxes get paid? Is that could you guys consider that as a possibility for how to get through some of these implementation challenges we've mentioned, in terms of how do you get taxes when a property is sold, right? You could make it mandatory to disclose that tax is due and to get it in escrow, right?
Are you
Yes,
talking
Chairman.
about, we do have a property disclosure now, as Commissioner Bean, I think, is aware of it. I don't know if we can add one more disclosure about empty that I haven't, that in the disclosure, the seller would say, I haven't occupied this property for the last 6 months. I think the disclosure will normally go to the legislature in order to have that effect, So I don't know about coming from the city. If that's part of the real estate disclosure you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like maybe do they disclose, do sellers disclose that there are no further that they've disclosed all obligations, liens, of the property before selling it, right? I mean, that would be covered in that, wouldn't it?
I'm not, I have to look back to, I have to look at the disclosure again, because I don't know if that's very specific as you are enumerating.
Well, I would just say, I think it would be possible to, write in our bill, an amendment to the property tax disclosure laws, that says that, this is part of that. This is part of that disclosure. Any obligations under this law would be included in obligations that are covered under property tax sales disclosure laws. Anyway.
Currently, the SRPDS, the seller's real property disclosure statement, a seller would need to disclose all material facts, but if it's not specific, then the responsibility is upon the seller to remember something like that, in order to disclose it. So there isn't anything in the disclosure currently that specifically would address.
Yeah, but I think Chair Mold is basically talking about inserting language of disclosure into this empty homes tax. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Chair?
Yes, thanks, Commissioner Legal. Yeah, I think that could be an option. So I think there's a remedy to this potential hurdle that we could look at. Sorry, I don't mean to monopolize the conversation here. Any other questions for the Rates and Classifications Committee on the empty homes proposal? Any more discussion, I should say?
Chair Wong here. I've got one issue that came up in my review of the report was the reliance on the UCLA study. And when I reviewed the UCLA study, I couldn't find a particular vacancy rate or a number for the homes that were vacant in Honolulu that they based these assumptions on. I think the best estimate that they could come up with was the out-of-state owners. And it struck me as a little bit, I guess, treacherous, because if the city does rely on a report that estimates this data based on ownership of out-of-state owners, that's using, out-of-state as a classification of who owns a property and who's vacant and who's not. I was wondering if there was a particular part of that report that I missed or a better number. I was interested when our earlier testifiers mentioned the census report, because that would be an entirely different set of data. But the UCLA report was in particular a little bit troubling because of that.
So I think if I remember correctly, there is this UCLA report. It's either the UCLA report or it's the resilience strategy of the city and county that council adopted. Cites to, and I know this because I was the analyst. I should disclose I was the analyst on that. There is a DBED report that they do every other year. That's the state of Hawaii's Department of Economic Development and Tourism. They take a look at this every year, and I think UCLA's numbers were based on some estimates, and some sort of calculations and adjustments on that DBED study, that biannual DBED study. I can find that for you, Vice Chair Wong, and we can share that and get that on the record.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think as a total, we all agree with the aim of the empty homes proposal. It makes sense, right, to increase the cost of holding a vacant home and to put that housing supply somewhere else. But I think the primary concern for me is just enforcement and compliance. I don't know if RPAT is particularly structured with its current highest and best valuation structure to implement a sort of actual use type of ordinance. I mean, this is the case for neighbor islands where they do have actual use provisions and those are applied, but Honolulu has a highest and best use here, and that's something that's been ingrained with both the residential and residential A classifications. This would be something distinct from the highest and best use system that we've had. In addition to that, I also worry a little bit about the compliance and how taxpayers would be audited. I mean, I think I raised this earlier on in committee meetings as to, the wielding the power of an audit against taxpayers is a pretty heavy sword, and for somebody to have to provide documentation, it costs money and it takes time and it's stressful. And I think that if an ordinance like this is to be recommended, there has to be an assurance that taxpayers, especially if they're providing sensitive information like the Vancouver Declaration requires, such as tax returns, bank certificates, insurance certificates, and lease agreements, that this is all kept private, that this is all not used against them, and that audits are implemented in a way that's, fair. And I know those are sort of general statements as opposed to questions. I wish I could formulate them that way, but yeah, I agree with the aims and I like where this is going, but those are the concerns that I have right now.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wong. That was well stated and well taken. We're certainly trying to work through implementation challenges and trying to think through unforeseen consequences. And we don't want to be foisting unforeseen consequences on folks if we can help it. Commissioner Pham.
Yep, thank you. Regarding the figures, the census data, as was discussed earlier, the estimate is about 85,000 vacant homes with a vacancy rate here of 15%. And then the housing planning study from 2019, which was prepared for HHFDC, includes figures for vacant and vacant available housing. But that may be the report you are referring to, Chair Mold.
That is the report. Thank you for reminding me. Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that clarification.
Yeah, Commissioner Peters, I just had one comment. Just to remind all my fellow commissioners, we're just an advisory commission, so we're not going to pass any laws. So that's going to all be up to the city council. So as a member of this commission, I would like to see us make some recommendations that would be consequential. And I think everything we've gone over since our first meeting, I think the vacant home tax would be the most consequential. So if there are some issues, I know during our subcommittee, we can probably work it out, things that have been raised today. But I think we should really keep working at this because, again, as I said, I would hope this body would submit some recommendations to the council that would be really worthwhile. And I think this is one.
Thank you, Commissioner Peters. Reminding us of the potential impact that this commission has, and let's remember this. We're in an urgent situation. The housing affordability crisis here, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And so, I would echo your statement, Chair Peters, and also add, hey, I think this is urgent for action, and I too agree that we should be putting forward best policy ideas that we can come up with. Now, I would like to note that Administrator Takara is on the line, is on the Zoom. I would like to give him an opportunity if he has any comments or questions of us. Administrator Takara, are you available to do you have a statement that you would like to make, or have you had a chance to look more closely at the current empty homes proposal that was recommended by the subcommittee, or reported on by the subcommittee? Obviously, implementation issues are going to be something we really want to think about those ahead of time. And one question I would have is if since we now have this concrete proposal put forward, would we be able to make an estimate of what kinds of resources RPAD would need, the Real Property Assessment Division would need to implement this type of bill? I guess that would be a question for you, and you could we could ask that question, and give you time to think about it. And I don't want to put you on the spot now, but I do see that you are on the call, so I would like to give you an opportunity.
I think our current or existing or previous questions are still outstanding. Definitions, this program that is proposed by the subcommittee actually would cause or calls for more resources to be required by VFS or to implement this program. I think I mentioned that the question as far as definitions, as far as what is the definition of unoccupied, I think I asked for, out of the 85,000 or 80,000 or whatever thousands or tens of thousands of vacant property, can we have like a list of about 100, to look at the validity of this type of list, or, I'm just saying that, Bill 76 and 69 or whatever the previous bills, those questions and concerns that maybe were prohibiting that those bills to go forward still exist. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Administrator Takara. Appreciate it. Now, do you think you would be able to make an assessment of what resources would be necessary to implement the bill based on the current bill that's put forth?
No, I would not. No, I would not be able to do that. I mean, again, as far as the declaration or, what is the default, I think I mentioned that, there's about 260,000 or maybe even, 1,000 parcels. There's about 150,000 home exemptions. So, that leaves about 110,000 parcels that could be in this classification. You weed out the ones that are actually being weeded out. Then you're talking about probate, the ones on the market, the ones that, are in the process of being rented out, all those listed exemptions. What is the default? We're going to put them in that vacant or empty tax class or supplemental tax. The unintended consequences, who's going to have to deal with that? What is the obligated? What is the projected income? Is it going to be feasible? I mean, there's just still, I'm just, I don't know where to begin. But from what I gather, this proposal, and honestly, I may have missed it, but it seems like it's not being addressed in the discussions or from what I read so far. So sorry to be so long-winded, but unfortunately at this point, I don't think me or anybody from BFS can provide an answer as far as how much city resources would it take and if it's feasible.
It's disappointing that you guys can't give it a try now that we've actually have a proposal put forward. I must say. So we may be continue asking if we may continue to ask you for that assessment, Administrator Takara. Thank you.
Can I ask a
I
clarification?
explained to you guys about what is needed, and I don't know. I mean, has a definition established? Were we given a list? So you guys, I mean, disappointment. That's fine. That seems like the theme of this commission. And hey, that's you guys' report, and I guess I'll live with it. I mean, so I don't know. I don't know what else to say. But
Can I ask a clarification? Just Administrator Takara, this is Jack Legal. I just have a clarification because you mentioned about Bill 79. Are you more in favor of Bill 79 than the supplemental empty home tax? Is it more clear? There's Bill 79.
No, I think it's 76, but I might be misrecalling the numbers. But does this proposal have clarification of what is unoccupied?
I'm sorry, 76. You're right. 76. You're right. 76.
Commissioner Dean asked about.
So I think that's a moot point. Whether it's unoccupied, it's based on the declaration of the homeowner. So we've solved that one. We believe we've solved that one, Administrator Takara.
Okay. Okay.
So if you would, please take a look at the latest information, and it'd be great if we could, get some help trying to assess sort of a cost-benefit analysis, or at least what it would take to implement this or look at it. And if you take a look at it and you don't have enough information or resources, I understand, but it'd be great if we could get some participation on this. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that, okay, help me understand. So the 110,000 parcels or the owners of those parcels, are they gonna supply the declaration?
At a risk of penalty, or if they don't, I mean, it's a risk, a taxpayer, is of a owner of a property, it's on them to declare. Just
Okay,
like you
okay.
would declare a homeowner's exemption, just like you
Okay,
would
let's
declare what
stop
your
right
what
there,
your
okay?
assets are, right?
So let's stop right there. Let's stop right there, okay? So the default, what I'm hearing is that the default is you're gonna be in that classification or supplemental classification, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so now it's the responsibility of the taxpayer to submit that declaration. Okay? I don't know what you guys' experience is, but how many people that live in their property that don't submit their home exemption application, and they fall into Res A? That's a problem every year that we have. So now we're going to increase that, and there's a 15,000 Res A properties. So now we're going to say 100,000 property owners going to have to supply this declaration, or they're going to be in this supplemental classification. What is the unintended consequence of that we're going to have to deal with? So to answer your question as far as how much resources, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, or maybe you can tell us how we're going to run the division to monitor this program. As far as, even if they say, oh, it's occupied, and they submit the declaration, how true is that? Do people? I don't know. I just have a hard time with. And it could be me. I mean, I'm trying to work things out, but could they falsify? How are we going to enforce it? What is the penalty? So now we're going to have people trying to verify the declaration, and we're going to try to have people the opposite side of the coin. I don't know. Again, maybe I have to read it better, but.
Well, we'd appreciate it if you if you could take a look at it and really consider if you could help us work out some kind of estimate for what resources would be needed, because there's been a lot of money floating around from the federal government, and if we lose this opportunity to modernize our system and address a significant public policy priority, affordable housing of the administration, I think it would be a huge lost opportunity. And so this commission, our recommendations are going to be based on that desire.
Okay, well, I guess I'm coming from the point as far as the likelihood or the likely department or the likely division that would implement this program. I may not be seeing it the way you guys see it, so I'm trying to understand it, but as far as the implementation, there's a lot of unanswered questions that not only I have, but other people in this division and maybe even BFS has, or even maybe council members have. So, again, the commission, you guys report is to council. And if this is the greatest consequential recommendation from the commission, then I don't know. I mean, I'm willing to work with it, but I guess I'm still sorry. I just can't provide resources. I think more information needs to be known.
Well, I certainly empathize. I mean, resources are difficult, so even getting resources to do studies and to look at things, I know that's a lot of time, and we've appreciated all of your cooperation and collaboration with us to date, and we continue to appreciate that. And I think we think this is such an urgent matter, and this is such an important recommendation coming out of this commission that we'd like to try to make get as many of the T's crossed and the I's dotted as possible. So thank you.
I have a
Mr.
comment
Chair,
from Vice
Mr.
Chair
Chair.
Wong for Administrator Takara. When we look at actual use types of provisions in the ordinances, we have the exemptions, we've got dedications, and it figures that the Real Property Assessment Division has to obviously dedicate, a different type of oversight to these exemptions and dedications than they do the classifications. Just as a cursory comment, when you look at an actual use provision like this involving empty homes, would that be on the same line of, the amount of work required? Or does it sound like it'd be more work or maybe less work? Could you give us maybe an indication of that?
Again, maybe I don't know the details of the bill or understand it to the level of the crafters or the drafters of the bill, but I would think it would require more resources. Again, the premise, my understanding is that the premise is not to have anybody in this subclassification or classification, right? Isn't the idea to put these units or these dwellings back on the market?
I think that's a good conversation. I mean, the ideal would put these units back on the market and lower the upward pressure on rental prices across the board on the island. But again, there's also probably a marginal taxpayer out there that's willing to hold an empty home and pay the tax and pay 3%. Because they're getting a lot of value of holding that asset. That asset has a lot more value to them for whatever reason. So I think there's going to be a mix of revenues generated from very, again, price insensitive taxpayers and wealthy folks with second homes, and folks that need to move it onto market or rent it to its highest and best use, which I think could be classified. I mean, I do think we're kind of there is a highest and best use argument to be made for this as well, because the second home sitting vacant is not a highest and best use, is it?
Mr. Chair, this is Jack Legal. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thanks, Commissioner Legal.
Just going back to Commissioner Peters' comment, we are an advisory body. So this is a recommendation to the council. The council has the opportunity to accept it or not. And if they do, they'll massage it. There'll be more public comments on this. And maybe if it goes through, they'll work out the details on this recommendations. And as of now, it's more, I know, I understand it's a very general recommendation, not too much details on what we're doing. But if it goes into the council, if they look at it and say, okay, this is worth our time to take it on, discuss it, get more public comments and everything, and then work out the details at that point, But our purpose here is just to recommend. This is a recommendation to the council. It's up to them if they want to take it or not, And if they do, then, they have to discuss it. That's just my understanding of this process, the whole process,
Thank you, Commissioner Legal. Commissioner Pham.
Yes, regarding the question about definitions, the bill that we have drafted as Appendix A sort of does, it's not an explicit definition of what empty means, but yes, it is by default, it's empty unless one of the following exemption conditions apply. So I think that our subcommittee did address the definition of what is vacant. Yes, that is a long definition, and it requires you to cross things off to ultimately say that none of these conditions apply. Therefore, my property is defined as vacant, empty, and I'm subject to the 3% tax. Regarding resourcing, also written into this appendix is provision that with the revenues that can be generated, we put a figure in here, but it can be negotiated as to how much of the revenue generated from the taxpayers who are willing to just pay for that vacant property to use that to administer this, because this would possibly generate revenue and likely generate revenue, but we as the commission don't have the data that is going to say, yes, this is how much revenue is going to be done. One of the things that happened whenever I was requesting information based on testimony from one of our public testifiers months ago was just to inquire a little bit more about a specific property, but the department said that due to privacy, we can't really look that granularly. So one thing that maybe we could do as a subcommittee is just to take things at random from the property information and just randomize 15% vacancy based on the census data and say, if these properties in our experimental set are supposedly vacant, here's how much revenue would be generated. And then we could scale that up. We could run that a few times. I'm not sure, is that something that would be for us to do? And could we get a data set that would not compromise privacy?
Also, I mean, you know, there are more benefits than just the revenue from the taxpayer, right? I mean, there's also going to be GET revenue on the rent, right, or income tax revenue that actually doesn't go to city coffers necessarily. And there's going to be, you know, the whole idea that it's more of a public benefit, that there are a lot of intangible public benefits that we write policies for. It's not all about, you know, revenue. It's also about, you know, cost and affordability and, you know, cleaning up a market, you know, failure and these kinds of things. But to Commissioner Pham, to your point, I think we could definitely take a look at. I think we should endeavor to make an estimate, and I think we can. You know, there are experts out in the field that we can ask, like Philip Garboden, who was a testifier before the commission, who I think would be, if I read him right, he might already have an estimate. If not, he'd be champing at the bit to do one up, and is very capable. Okay. Are we okay with moving on to our next agenda item? Are there any more questions on this for now? I mean, we're going to talk about our schedule going forward, but we, you know, this is not our decision. This is not decision making on this measure at this stage. It's still discussion. And of course, the subcommittee can take all of this back and work on this as well. So can we now move to the Valuation Subcommittee and discussion on the Valuation Subcommittee report?
I think we forgot already.
Well, luckily we did have some discussion on it already right after it. So
Yeah.
inadvertently we may have sequenced that well.
I'm really, Jack Legal. I'm really glad that the Valuation Committee is taking on this leasehold valuation, you know, because it is really something that is so out of this world, you know, as far as understanding how it's being done, you know, so.
That was actually my question.
Yeah.
If anybody here had any background information on how this came to be, because it does seem, you know, if we're not, I understand that we're tackling these issues on several different levels, and that the city is looking for ways to increase, you know, its income. But in this case, it just seems so, it just seems so unbelievable that somebody could be paying taxes on somebody else's property. It was, I was just wondering if anybody had any background information on it.
I don't have any real background on this. Just what I've heard from being in the tax appeal board commission or committee or board, yeah, and especially when they were appealing the valuation of their properties in Hawaiian Princess, which are all leasehold, and there's a lot of questions about leasehold being evaluated as fee simple, actually. So in other words, as far as valuation for the city is concerned, leasehold does not exist. It's all fee simple, which is mind-boggling to most of us, and that's why I said, wow, this is hard to understand,
Yep, Commissioner Bean. So when we're talking about people who are able to carry a greater responsibility for taxes, and then we look at a situation like this, and we know the corporations and the people who are holding these leases are capable of paying their own taxes, but we're putting the taxes on the small guys, the guys that, I mean, if you're, let's say if we're only talking about a residential buyer, if they're buying leasehold versus fee, they're probably in the lower strata of income. That would be the assumption that's made. And yet they're paying the taxes as though they own that property when they do not. They get no benefit other than what they're already paying a lease fee. They're paying for the improvement. And then on top of that, they're paying the taxes on the property, the fees, the property that they don't even own or have any benefit for, especially when you're talking about leaseholds that have shorter time spans available on it. I mean, they've lost any kind of real benefit on it. So it's just an interesting situation.
I have a quick question. If I may ask, be able to ask.
What's that?
Sure, go ahead, Administrator Takara, please.
Oh,
So if I understand it correctly, the commission feels, or the subcommission feels, that it's inequitable to tax leasehold interest at the fee simple interest or in its entirety. Is that what's happening?
That's correct.
On
I
the
think that's
face of
correct.
it,
That's what's happening, Stephen. I mean,
No, okay, so to follow up on that, so is the commission or the subcommittee suggesting we do a partial interest tax system where we now tax the leasehold interest a portion and the fee owner a portion?
I see what you're getting, Vice Chair Wong here. I see what you're getting at when we look at the term of the lease and, and differentiating that. But yes, that I do realize that could create problems with, the use and the estimated lifespan of the lease and all of that. Is that what you're getting to?
Yeah, I just, I guess I'm trying to understand, the recommendations or the comments, this and many other things that have been written and said.
Right. I think the way around that problem would be to actually just tax the owners. I think putting the onus on the property owner, even if they are renting out the leasehold, because they would be receiving rents and they could adjust based on their tax burden accordingly.
I'm sorry, so the taxpayer would be the fee simple?
Right, the
owner?
fee owner as opposed to the leasehold. We haven't come up on a concrete suggestion. As of right now, we've just been raising that issue as to whether or not it's equitable for leaseholders to take the entire valuation on the head right now.
and the other two, so Takara, on the inequity, when a lessee pays the entirety, the land and the improvements, And then it's a short-term lease with a surrender clause, you know. After that, they have to give up everything back to the lessor. After paying the taxes on the land and everything, you know, so, I mean, there's gonna be, as Chair Wong was saying, Vice Chair Wong was saying, maybe ask the lessor or the fee simple owner to pay for the tax for the land, you know, because they own the land.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that between the lessor and the lessee when it comes to real property taxes? I mean, when one negotiates the lease terms, is real property taxes a component of negotiation or terms of the lease?
No, I think on the commercial side, I think, correct me, Vice Chair Wong, because you're probably more familiar with this. On the commercial leases, normally the lessee will pay the tax, right, on the commercial.
Right.
properties.
When you look at section
Yeah.
8-6.3, when there's improved residential land leased for a term of 15 years or more, the real
Yeah.
property shall be assessed in its entirety to the lessee or the
Yeah.
lessee's successor in interest.
That's right.
No, yeah, so I'm just trying to, because this historically and, to this day is a topic of discussion. We get inquiries every year about this, leasehold versus fee simple and, the ad valorem taxation based upon fee simple or in its entirety. And, along with this empty homes tax, for us to, have a tax system based upon partial interest, similar to the empty tax. I don't know what resources it would take to implement such a tax structure.
Vice Chair
How
Wong,
many leasehold
those
properties are there out there?
those are good comments. I don't think those were, contemplated in subcommittee's discussions, and I think that's a good observation as to, why it would be difficult to implement a sort of two-tiered approach or a bifurcated lessee and fee simple. I don't think we considered that. So, no, thank you for that.
I mean, sorry, I just, I guess, again, as Mr. Commissioner Legal and Commissioner Peters and other commissioners expressed, this report, it goes to, is for council. I guess historically, I guess real property administrator or BFS, this was a resource to the commission and seems like, whatever, questions or whatever we can try and help, but, if we're relegated to just, because I think the earlier approach of this commission was that this is a report that you guys are assembling and submitting, and I have full support, and I'm just here for question and answers, but I don't want to sway. I think that's the direction that was given to me, that be just available for question and answer. But I don't know. I just feel like I don't know. I just there's a lot of questions that brought up and comments that I feel I should reply on, but again, I'll minimize my input and just kind of cite it should council ask DFS for input or comments and responses thereafter, after you guys' reports are submitted and stuff. And
thank you, Administrator Takara, for your support on this.
I apologize to the chair and other council members. If I was out of bounds, and I'll just relegate to the Q&A as directed. So I apologize again, and thank you very much.
No apology necessary. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if you have, please if you have specific things, please, by all means, we're all yours. And we appreciate your collaboration to this point. Thank you, Administrator DeCaro. So anything else on the valuations subject matter? Yeah, I would just like to reiterate that, the higher level discussion of that subcommittee report was the need for transparency and ease of understanding. And it's really important that taxpayers know and can understand how their properties are being assessed, because it's a very important piece of information to have, and it can have major impacts on folks' financial well-being. So, are there any other comments for the Valuations Committee? Thank you. There was one other matter on our agenda, which was Bill 39, 2021. I believe Commission Aide White can give us a brief update on Bill 39, 2021 and where we're at.
Yes, very briefly, Commissioners. We had discussed inclusion of, or you all had discussed inclusion of addressing Bill 39, which was the renewable energy exemption issue, in the interim report. However, in the interim, since your last commission meeting, Bill 39 was further discussed by the council, and I believe will be addressed at the full commission or full council meeting this Wednesday. There was a CD1 or CD2 that was extensively discussed at the last council meeting, which was between your all's commission meeting and today. And that commission draft appears to have been a workable compromise and to a certain degree, a type of Band-Aid on the issue. There were comments made by certain council or various council members, which included specifically suggesting that once, this Band-Aid measure for Bill 39 is dealt with because of the need for it to be addressed before December 15th. Certain council members did make reference to a desire for the commission for ORPTAC to take a longer look at it, as was discussed in testimony by the State Energy Office and various stakeholders, to address the issues of equity and rates, classifications, exemptions. So Bill 39 encompasses, as I think was discussed at the commission meeting last time, many issues. As far as Bill 39 specifically, the issue that was urgent is being addressed essentially as a Band-Aid to address the immediate issue and the position of the Real Property Assessment Division. So that will be dealt with, but the recommendation and comments from council members was a hope that the Real Property Tax Advisory Commission would take a deeper dive look at the issue and flesh it out and give their thoughts on the matter. Chair, did that summarize the matter?
I think that summarized it well. Thank you, Commission Aide White. And I think so. I think this will be something we can look at for our later, more comprehensive report, and not in this interim report. So thank you, Commission Aide White. Are there any questions from commissioners?
Commissioner Peters, I just got a quick question for George. So you said there's a meeting this Wednesday, that's the 1st of December?
Yes.
On that topic, and do you know what time that meeting?
It'll be at 10 a.m. I'm almost positive, but it's the last council meeting of the year.
Okay.
And I can forward the commissioners the agenda that was posted, I believe, last week, Wednesday, because of Thanksgiving. But it's the last full council meeting. There are no committee meetings during the month of December, but it's the last full council meeting that's scheduled. Now, the council can always schedule its own meetings when it wants, but as far as scheduled meetings, it'll be this Wednesday.
Great, thank you. And by the way, the budget committee hearing that heard this, this was so as you know, in those meetings, there's testimony on all items beforehand, and one of the other items that was up for hearing was the transient accommodations tax, which is a hugely important matter before the city right now, and basically that took all day. And so So Bill 39 wasn't heard till the very end, but it was a substantive conversation, and there has been a near-term remedy for the emergent matter. And again, we're going to be taking a look at the longer-term issue in our report. Okay, members, before, we're getting close to our time, so I'd like to move on to the next agenda item. Before we reach any additional announcements that you may have, I've asked Commission Aide White to briefly discuss the process and timing of our work for the 4 weeks ahead to allow us to finalize an interim report to the Council.
Thank you, Chair. So very briefly, Commissioners, we've had or you all have had a very good discussion related to the 2 reports provided by the subcommittees. Essentially, what we need moving forward is 1 meeting to approve or disapprove or amend or change the recommendations of the subcommittee reports if there's certain things you like or don't like, and this is a hypothetical example. If the issue of fee simple and leasehold is a little bit more deeper dive that the Valuation Subcommittee says, you know what, let's hold off on that recommendation right now. Those types of decisions will need to be made at 1 meeting. Joined with that meeting, hypothetically, we can already have the work going for a draft of the interim report. So technically, all I need from you all is 2 more meetings. If you want 3, that would make it a little bit more, give us a little more flexibility. But in the next 4 weeks, I need at least 2 meetings. And the main things we need to accomplish in those 2 meetings is 1, to approve recommendations made by the subcommittee. And then in addition, if the commission has additional thoughts as a whole body, which has been discussed in open session and in public, those make it into the report too, if you guys so move and so take action. But as far as action on the subcommittee reports, I need 1 meeting to do that. And in that same meeting, we can also be discussing the interim report. We can get an initial draft going for you to talk about. But that initial report, whatever it may be, or interim report, needs to sit also. And that's why I need the second meeting for you to approve the interim report. So we need 2 meetings, maybe 3 if you'd like, but we can do it in 2. But again, what I need from you all as your scribe is to understand kind of and I've got a general idea from your discussion today, kind of where the conversation is heading with the specific matters discussed by the subcommittee. But if there are other matters that you would like possibly a placeholder for, or kind of a bullet point or something, or if you'd like more fleshed out, like Vice Chair Wong mentioned regarding the housing inventory and the citation to those to the vacant homes reports, let me know that so that we can start incorporating that into the skeleton draft of the interim report. But all that type of stuff can be discussed here amongst you all and give me an idea. But the main thing is I need a meeting to approve the recommendations or disapprove or amend the recommendations of the subcommittee reports. And then I need a meeting either at that same meeting where an interim report is posted and allowed for the public to comment on. And then we need a second meeting to ultimately approve your all's recommendations for this interim report to the council. Hopefully that makes sense, but we need 2 meetings, possibly 3. And they don't need to be spaced out by a week or whatnot. They can be, but we can do it back to back too, if you guys think we're ready for that or whatnot. So let me know if you have questions, but hopefully that clarifies what we need before the end of the year, if you would like to do the interim report.
Well, I'd like to, one thing is I think the subcommittees may need to meet before the next meeting to flesh out any, amendments or additions to the recommendation. So I guess I put it to the subcommittees. Are you all going to be able to, when would you be able to meet to finalize recommendations based on our discussion?
For us, Commissioner Pham, December 7th is fine with me. I'm coming back from a trip, so. So
So the
then-
earliest for you is the 7th.
Yeah. Because I'm coming back on the 4th.
Yep.
It's Saturday and I have a lot of meetings on Monday. So
When do you
7th.
leave? Do you leave this week?
I'm leaving tonight.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So that will be the earliest for me. I'm sorry.
No worries. We'll discuss after. Commissioner Peters, I think historically your schedule is very flexible.
Yeah, I can make just almost any time.
Excuse the airplane noise above me. Okay, well, I think, Chair, the 2 weeks from now for the full commission is viable for our subcommittee. Though,
Is that,
do
Is
we,
that too late,
we don't actually
George?
need to have the report drafted because it's at that next meeting in which things are presented, discussed, and that's officially when it's presented, and then we approve at the next meeting after. So we can be right up against the next meeting. George?
Right, so your reports are already in. Any changes that you all want to make, we can essentially incorporate into the future report. We don't have to per se approve word for word whatever changes you all are envisioning or discussing. As long as I'm aware of them and I can incorporate them into the interim report, meaning the full commission's report draft, that's all I need is to get that publicly noticed and then have a second meeting after that. As far as changes that you all discuss, I can incorporate that into the agenda. I can do all sorts of things, but we don't have the kind of like 1 meeting, 2 meeting thing now. You guys have submitted the report, and now as the full commission, you're basically going to take a shot to see whether or not you believe the commission's going to go along with certain changes that you all want to make. You've got a feeling from discussion, and now it's just a matter of whether the full commission adopts or disagrees with certain matters that have spawned off of your report. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes,
so
that
we're in the process of writing the interim report right now. So I think what the subcommittee would be meeting about is they're meeting to talk with themselves and ask questions of any other members if they've had them, to get you the recommendation for what should be written in the final interim report. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And that final report we'd want to present at our next meeting and of the full commission. And it's after that, it's the meeting after that where, and in that meeting, any changes would take place. And then and if we wanted to approve something, it would be at the next meeting where we could approve it. Is that correct? Is that right?
For the interim report to the council, yes, you would need the second meeting. At this next, if you all want to sit with 2 meetings, let's say hypothetically, we set a meeting 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks out. At that meeting, we would formally take action on the subcommittee's recommendations as a result of their reports that they provided. At that same meeting, the commission can similarly entertain a draft of their interim report and discuss changes, edits, additions, corrections, removals. It can discuss that full report. And then we would have the second meeting to basically say, okay, this is the final draft. This is what we're working with. And this is what we want to send to the council. Does that make sense?
So, George, so let's
Yes.
say we have a meeting on the 7th, December 7th, theoretically. It is basically to make changes or amendments to what we heard today from our discussion. And then present that to the board for the commission.
As far as meeting the 7th, I believe you're referring to like a meeting of the subcommittee?
The subcommittee, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
The
So the
subcommittee.
subcommittee can meet and chat and whatnot, as long as you have a good gauge on kind of where things are at,
Yeah,
you would set the full commission meeting. You don't need to necessarily provide me anything specific. Information's helpful because it'll help me in drafting the interim report for the full commission. So I could ideally incorporate certain things that are discussed at your subcommittee on the 7th in the interim report that I'm putting together for the full commission. You don't
Okay.
need to
Yeah.
make additional recommendations for approval for the subcommittee reports. Subcommittee
So-
reports are done, but you as a full commission will take action on them at the next meeting. But the main goal is the full interim report, which we can have heard on the same meeting day that you approve the subcommittee stuff. Does that make sense? The subcommittee reports are just the initial brick, and going with it, going against it, changing it, it's completely up to you all and will be decided at the next meeting of the commission. And you don't have to have that in writing. It's just basically, there will be motions that can be made to say, I support the recommendation for the empty homes proposal with these certain changes, and then see if the commission agrees.
Okay.
So really, it's at the discretion of the subcommittee members if they want to, clarify anything or push for any changes and get that information to George as he's drafting up our interim report.
Okay.
So why don't
There's
we,
no
do we want
Commissioner
to schedule,
There's no.
do we want to try to schedule a meeting for our next meeting for Monday, December 13th?
December 13. I have a doctor's appointment at 3:30.
How about Tuesday, the 14th? Or what we could do the morning of Monday, the 13th.
Tuesday is all open if we go for Tuesday, 14, December
I
14.
would prefer the Monday earlier.
Monday earlier.
Good.
Monday is okay too, like in the morning. It's
How
fine.
about 10 a.m. Monday, December 13th?
Yeah, that'd be great.
That works for me.
That works.
Great. I like that, getting an early start. And then for scheduling the second meeting, Commission Aide White, what do you think? Do we want to give us maybe 2 days? Or do we want to try to do it the next day? And if we don't get resolution, we have some time then to schedule another meeting before the end of December.
Again, this is completely within the commissioner's discretion. So if the December 13th meeting is the next meeting, ideally, is it I think my understanding is correct that there will be a draft interim report of the full commission ready for the commission to review on the 13th, and it will discuss it. And then at that same meeting, also approve the subcommittee stuff. But
Or do we
I would
want to just do the subcommittee reports at the next meeting?
It is your all's call. I think to keep the ball rolling, and you all have discussed stuff pretty thoroughly enough that I believe with the chair's review, I believe I can pull together a draft that's workable. And that way we don't run into the public notice issue of not having something and then requiring to get it published and rush it. The 13th.
I think we have enough. Yeah, I think we have enough.
What
And if there are some questions have come up, and I think we can put placeholders in our recommendation, given the fact that this is a recommendation to council, we can identify the issue of further investigation or whatnot in the report for some of these. So I would recommend that we go ahead and draft up an interim report and have it ready for discussion on the 13th at the meeting on the 13th.
That is doable. And I think to respond to your question directly, to do a back-to-back meeting, the 13th, 14th, or 15th, it's completely doable. But as far as drafting and given the nature of the discussions and conversations of the commissioners, perhaps if it works, it'd be preferable to do like the 13th and the 20th. And that gives essentially, after the meeting on the 13th, we'll have a good idea. We'll need to agendize the meeting on the 20th by the 14th. And then if things work out on the 20th and you guys are happy with the draft and everything within it, on the 20th, you can just say, good to go, we approve it, send it out. Now, if there's changes or if there's issues, we can set another meeting within the next 10 or 11 days. But ideally, it could be POW by the 20th.
I like that. So I'm good with. I propose 2 meetings, one on the 13th at 10 a.m. To discuss an interim draft report, and the next on the 20th to approve any changes that are made in the meeting on the 13th. And I say, how about 10 a.m. on Monday the 20th as well?
Yeah, that's fine.
Commissioners and President Peters and Vice Chair Wong both say that works as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
20th
great.
At 10 a.m., yeah?
So seeing unanimous consent on this of the members present, our next meetings will be Monday, December 13th at 10 a.m. The agenda will be a discussion of a draft of an interim report, and then December 20th at 10 a.m. to approve the draft with any changes that are made in the December 13th meeting.
And Chair, if I may, I've always reached out or made myself available, but given the drafting of the interim report, the commissioners should not feel constrained simply by the subcommittee's reports themselves. If there are additional issues or if there's a paragraph or something you want said, feel free to let me know and I can work that into the draft. And again, it's your all's document and you can cut, paste, include, disclude, whatever you want, but just email me and let me know and I can work it into the draft. But my operating instructions at this point will be to work primarily from the discussions you all have had and the reports that have been submitted and will be approved. But I have a good idea of where the commission is heading with our discussion on the subcommittee reports today.
Thank you, Commissioner A. White. We value your work on this. We really appreciate it, and it's been super valuable. If commissioners have stuff they want to ping, send to George. If you want to also include me, please feel free, because I'm going to be working on this as well, this drafting with George and making myself available.
Sounds good.
Okay, so decided. So I think we're over time now, so I think I'm gonna call the meeting. Are there any I'll give a chance for any pressing announcements of commissioners that they want to get out? Okay. There being no further business today, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion to adjourn by Commissioner Legal and a second by, I heard Vice Chair Wong in there. There being no objections, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
See you soon.